Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Monday Night Live, and it's a special Monday Night Live. I know you guys think I say that a lot, but it really is a special treat tonight because we have Royal Crown Diamonds, Ben and Carol Howden, joining us from Canada tonight. And they are, I don't know, I have a lot of people that I love in this Young Living business and respect and admire, but these two are just people with amazing hearts. They have not just given of themselves to teach about oils and about wellness, but they have really just been around the world to love on people and share oils, and also to give of themselves and their time and their family's time to invest in the Northern Lights farm. You're going to hear all about that tonight. You're going to hear about their beginnings, and you're going to hear about just the stories that they have of our founder, Gary Young. I'm honoring him tonight with my convention shirt from a few years ago. So I want everybody to just please feel free to put questions in that we're recording this, because I know that they're going to tell some stories that we're going to want to share with members who join 5 and 10 years down the line too. So Ben and Carol, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'm just going to start off with saying you have the floor. And if you want to just, first of all, tell us how you got started and maybe some of your first impressions of Gary.
So interesting. Well, first of all, thank you, Laura. And we have a lot of special memories of you and Jonathan as well. And Jonathan was at the farm. And he also had a lot of connections with Gary. So the farms seem to unite us. And so if you haven't been to a farm, convention does, but not the same way that a farm experience does. And so if you can ever get to a farm, get to a farm. That was Gary's heart. That's where he was the most comfortable. That's where he told the most stories. That's where he shared his heart the most. And so lots and lots of special memories with that. So how we got started, well, I was the one who got started in Young Living, and it was in the fall of 1999. And I was introduced to Young Living because I was in a very bad place in my life. And I was basically living in a closet and I didn't want to be here. Let's just put it that way. I didn't want to be here. And so I was introduced to the oils, and I was tricked into checking out the oils to help somebody else. And it wasn't for me. They knew me well enough that I wouldn't do it for myself, but they asked me to do it for them. And so I checked it out for them. And then after I was introduced to the oils, this is how sick I was. I went to this lady's place. It took me about an hour and a half to drive 20 minutes because I just wanted to pull in front of semis. But I never could because they'd look at me, and I didn't want my family to think that I did it on purpose. So I finally got to this lady's house, and then I went in and I was sitting in there, and she had lemon oil diffusing. And in the micro mist diffuser, there was actually the addition to a trailer. So it was this really small little place, and the diffuser was sitting about here, and the lemon was just misting down on top of me. And so then she started sharing the oils with me. I just told her I come to learn about oils. That was all I told her. And I sat down and she started sharing the oils with me. And at that time, you know what we had? It was the Essential 7. So we had the little Essential 7, and she told me about those oils, and then I just sat there. And so she had an Aroma Complete kit. So she pulled out the Aroma Complete kit and she went through the whole Aroma Complete kit, passing me the oils, having me smell them. And then when she was done that, I just sat there, and all I could think about was, how am I going to get out of here? How am I going to get out of here? How am I going to get out of here? And finally, I just stood up and said, thank you, I'm going to go now. And that was the total of our conversation. And I remember opening the door to her house, and I walked out, and I just stood there on her doorstep, and it's like, oh, the sky is blue. Oh, there's leaves. Oh, there's grass. And I just remember just this fog had lifted, and I walked to my car. I got in the car and I drove home, and I got home and I said to Ben, I just drove home. I just drove home. And I was so excited that I had driven without either parking on a railroad track or trying to pull in front of semis. And then that was when we had those real phones, the ones that you pick up and you talk on. And then I sat down and we had a 1-page leaflet with names of oils and the phone number at the bottom. And I just went through that list and I went, oh, I think I like that. Oh, I think I like that. Oh, I think I like that. I think I like that. And I ordered like $1,000. It was $680 Canadian, but that was $1,000 US. I mean, it was $680 US. That was $1,000 Canadian. And then I called Ben and they said, I just ordered oils. And he said, you did what? And so that's how I got started. And when I got my order, I remember sitting on the floor in the front of my front entrance, where I often sat anyway, because I would sit in the closet in front of the door in case I had to get out anyway. So I was sitting there and I was opening the oils, and I remember I dumped them in my hand. I would just dump them in my hand and then I'd eat them. And I'd dump more in my hand and I'd eat them. I didn't know what you're supposed to do with them. And then I'd rub the rest of it all over my body. And within 2 days, I was out of the depression and the suicidal wishes that I had, and they've never come back.
Wow.
And so for me, it's always about inhalation. You know, like it was the inhalation that changed what was going on in my brain. And I don't have to know how it worked. I just know it worked. And it changed my life forever. And if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be here. And so I hadn't met Gary at that point. You know, I hadn't met him then. And so then I just called up Young Living in a couple of weeks and I said, I don't know if this made a difference, but if it did, I want to know more. And so they were having a class in San Francisco, a 5-day training, and Marcella was teaching that. Gary wasn't there, so I didn't meet Gary then. And then I went to the convention after that, and that's when I met Gary. And I didn't get to talk to him then, but I went. Then he had, shortly after that, he had an emotional release training when he was having, I don't know if you remember when he was having level 1s and level 2s with the emotional release. And so that's where I met him, was at one of those. And I remember, I can still feel at that class, he went by me and he put his hand on my shoulder and talked to me, and I can still feel his hand on my shoulder. There was just something about his presence. He was so present when he was talking to you. He was 100% there. And one of the things that I learned from Gary more than anything else, I think, was that he cared about people in a way that he would do. The thing that he wanted to do was improve the quality of life for someone else. And now I have leaky eye syndrome.
So meanwhile, she's getting used to this and using these oils and loving these oils. And I'm looking at her and thinking she smelled like a Christmas tree. And you know, I was she had tried different things and tried to get, you know, help, and been to Mexico and been all over. And so I was waiting to see, you know, if it really was working. Now she was excited about it, but she was before in different things, you know. So we were just kind of waiting for that to either die or grow, right? And so for a couple of 3 years, I just watched her use the oils and supported her in what she was doing, and it was making a difference for her. So that was good, and I enjoyed that. And so all of a sudden, one day I was in just north of Calgary, Alberta, working on a roof. And I slipped on a roof and I slid off the edge and dropped 20 feet off a 2-story building, and I landed on my heels and bust out my heels and ankles on both sides. And so they took me to emergency, and they phoned Carol, and she came in, and the doctor said, we're going to have to amputate both of your legs because I can't fix them. They're too badly broke. He said, you got 57 breaks in them legs. And Carol was there, and she had been 3 years in this business, and she just looked square in the eyes of the doctor and said, amputation's not in our vocabulary. And he said, well, I'm the surgeon, not you. And she said, well, if you don't want to do surgery, then we need another opinion. So he got in a bit of a huff and he left. And the next day, another doctor came in. And he basically said the same thing. He said, we've made a decision that we have to cut them off, his legs off. And she said, well, we still need another opinion because this man's going to walk again. So we went through 5 surgeons in 3 days, and she would not back down. So finally, one of the surgeons was a young surgeon, and he said, I would tackle it if I had another person to help me. So let me see if I can find another surgeon, and together we can do 1 leg each. So they came back and said, yeah, we're willing to give it a shot, but we can't do it because your legs are as big as balloons right now. So you'll have to go home and wait till this swelling goes down, and then we'll do it. Now I'm kind of, basically laying there in their mercy, and they had me on morphine and laying there. And so he said we had to go home, and I said, well, can I just wait here, doc, until the swelling goes down? And he said, no, come back when they're back to normal size so I can do surgery. So our oldest son, Corey, came in with an SUV, and we took me home, and my legs were just like limp. So I was on a massage table, and Carol worked with me with oils every day. Now, this was my first big exposure to oils. And she did oils and oils and oils every day, oils, all kinds of oils. And we went off medication, and I was just strictly on oils for about 12 days. And of course, I couldn't move, I couldn't walk. And so she had people coming in and out, sitting with me 24 hours a day. And I was at home. And in them 12 days, my legs went from green to red to purple to orange and back to normal white. And they were coming back to normal size. And they were pretty much normal size, except they were bumped out all over the place from the bones. So then they took me back in for a checkup 12 days later. And the doctor come in, and he looked at my legs, and he said, you're ready for surgery. So you can come back in 3 days and we'll do surgery. And I said, look, doc, it was like a big deal getting here, right? Because my legs were just limp. I said, can I just stay here? And he said, no, you come back in 3 days. So they took me back home again. It took me a couple of days to kind of get settled down again because it was pretty excruciating with all them breaks. Anyways, we came back, and we're in day surgery, waiting for surgery. And Carol was putting oils on, putting aromases on so that I would be settled with my legs. And the nurse came along and said, I love the smell there. What are you doing with his legs? Carol said, well, it's an oil called aromases. Keeps the pain down. She said, oh, I can get you some meds. Carol said, no, it's fine. These are keeping the pain down. She come back about 5 minutes later and says, I got a sore shoulder. Do you think those oils would help my shoulder? And this was in Calgary, big Calgary hospital. And Carol said, yeah, probably would. She said, well, can you come behind the curtain here and put a little on my shoulder and see if it makes a difference? So she did. And she came back and she said, man, does that feel nice? Pretty soon she came along with another nurse. She said, this is Brenda McDonald, and she can't even bend down to put her shoes on. Her back hurts so bad. Do you think you could put some of them oil on her back? So she was just using aromases. So this was day surgery, and there's all kinds of people there and nurses all over. 7 nurses got oil put on their back before they come to get me for surgery an hour later. And in comes the doctor to get me. And he goes, what is that smell? I can smell it all the way back to the elevator. What? I've never smelled that smell in here before. What in the world is that smell? And they said, it's that person right over in the corner. He come over there. What is that smell? And Carol said, well, it's aromases. It's a combination of oils that keep the pain down. He said, well, you're ready for surgery. Let's go. So that was the end of that conversation. So they took me into surgery and did 4.5 hours on each ankle. And the next morning when I woke up, Carol was there waiting for me to wake up, and the nurse come in, and the doctor come in anyways. And he said, well, you're a lucky man to have your legs, and you better go get a good Xbox because you won't walk for 1.5 years, and you'll never walk without assistance again, but at least you have your legs. So he left, and Carol said to me, so when do you think you're going to walk again? I go, well, I don't know. Doc said 1.5 years. She said, it doesn't matter what the doctor said. What do you think? And I go, I don't know. I'd like to walk in 6 months. What do you think? She said, it's not up to me. It's not up to me. It's up to you. She said, well, here's the thing. I won a trip to Hawaii with a very young juice contest back then, and it leaves in 3 months from today, and I'm not going to push a wheelchair. So if you want to come, you're going to have to be walking.
I love it. That's awesome.
So 3 months to the day, I was back in shoes and my crutches, and I went to Hawaii with her. So, when people want us to join another company, they want us to try different oils. They want us to try something that's spectacular. this has been our life and it's changed our life. So these oils are something that kind of was part of our family. So changing companies would make absolutely no sense at all. And it's all based on what Gary's focus was. Gary was a focused man. Every day he was focused on helping the oils. And sometimes Mary and the kids hardly felt like they knew Gary because he's so far above looking for things, looking for oils, looking for things, because he was dedicated to help the world change their life. And so it was a big deal for Gary to do what he did. He was a martyr in this essential oil business.
So in those first few times when I was with Gary, the way that he talked about the oils and the way that he talked to people and the way that he talked to me when I talked to him is that I was left with absolute 100% confidence in what the oils could do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew what they'd done for me. I knew how much they had changed me. And so I just had confidence that if they could help me, they could help anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Ben had that need, I didn't have confidence in what I could do, but I had absolute confidence that if he chose for them to work, they would.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the things with Gary, he had a heart to help people in a way like I've never seen before and I've never seen since. And he was totally in love with improving the quality of life for other people. Mm-hmm. And so then, I went everywhere Gary went and learned from him. Every time he had a class, I was there learning. And I wanted to know everything about the oils basically, but I basically wanted to learn it from Gary. Mm. And so that's what I did. And then when you tell about when he asked us to come and help.
And we had been with him in France and Ecuador and all over Croatia and different places. And so we're at the diamond trip in France. And we were walking around in a castle. And he said, Ben and Carol, do you want to walk with us today? And he was with a couple of his boys and he wanted us to walk with him. So kind of a privilege. And we were walking along and he said, hey, would you build me a farm in Fort Nelson? I want to build a black spruce farm. And I go, well, I'll think about that. And he said, okay, well, you think about it because we need black spruce and we need it really bad for valor and we need it for peace and calming, and we need it for different things. And he said, we can't get enough from Northern Quebec and they're not giving us enough and everybody's wanting it and they're begging for it. So I said, okay. So then the next day we were down in Paris and we're on a cruise ship one night and we're all having the final day and it was dark out, going under the Eiffel Tower, and he walked up nose to nose with me and he said, so Ben, are you going to help me or not? And so I said, yeah, Gary, I will. And I didn't know what that meant, but I just knew. And some of the other diamonds were there and they said, he'll eat you up and spit you out. Like, that man works all the time. He never quits. He's a workaholic. And he said, I don't know if you'll be able to keep up with him. And, that challenged me. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. I know I can do it. Right. So when we got back home, that was Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon, we're putting stuff away from our suitcase and the phone rings. Hi, this is Gary. Now, it was the first phone call I ever got from Gary. I said, where are you, Gary? He said, I'm in Fort Nelson. How about when can you come up here? I said, Gary, I just got home last night. He said, yeah, me too. Can you come tomorrow? I go, well, I guess. Yeah, and pack your suitcase. So next day, I got on a plane and flew up, and I phoned my son, Corey, and he was working gold mining in Philippines, and I asked him if he'd come home and put that on pause and give me a hand building this place for Young Living. And so he flew home and got trailer and all the tools lined up and some men, and he come up. And so when he got up there, already Gary had, was planning where this building was going to be and doing all these different things. And I was kind of excited and he was kind of excited to get going. And so away we went, and our days become like the hardest working I've ever done in my life. It was amazing. That guy never quits. He never quits because he's so focused. And every day he was up at 6 a.m. and wanting breakfast at 7. And Carol came up and lived up there with Corey's wife, and they lived there and they did the cooking. And They bring lunch out at dinner time, and he'd come in at 7:30 at night with all of us, and they'd have supper ready, and he'd sit around the table and tell us stories about a country he'd been to, or this had been a little journey he'd been on, or whatever. And then he'd go to the room and get on emails till midnight. And then 6 o'clock in the morning, he's back up again and ready for breakfast at 7. And day after day after day after day. And we started in September, and by November, we were starting to frame walls, and I was burnt right out. And I said to Carol one day, I said, you know, Carol, I think I'm going to.
Well, it was cold. It was like -40.
Yeah, it was really, really cold out. I said, I think I'm going to run away. She said, you're not going nowhere. You're staying right here. So anyways, we're standing out looking at the building one day, and Gary's ears were freezing and his nose was white. I said, Gary, why don't we just shut down till March, come back here? It would be half the cost and we'd get it done twice as fast. And it's just so cold. Everything's breaking. He said, Ben, you can go home, but I'm not going nowhere. He said, you don't get 100 calls a day looking for valor, but I do. So that was a defining moment for me, because I had to decide. And so we just committed, and had a talk with the men and said, you know, I don't care what it takes and how cold it gets, we're going to be committed. And we're going to work every single day. And some quit, and some we hired new people, and the crew we had was like 18 people, and they were fully committed. They were totally 100% committed. And Gary was there every day working. He was out there running the cat, or running this or running that. And he was so excited when we set the big vats in, and he wanted a picture taken with all the men and him standing in front of the big vat in the middle of a snowstorm. And he was just totally excited about every step of the way. And, you know, this wasn't his first farm, and it wasn't his first gig, but, you know, he was excited like it was. It was just amazing. He just had total interest in that, you know. So that's kind of how we started. And you know, I think that was it, changed my life forever. I mean, I felt like I changed who I was. It changed how I think, changed my commitment level, because I've learned from somebody that's proven that this is possible, that you can actually do whatever you want to do if you stay committed to it. And Gary was totally committed, right? So because of that, he had a friendship with us that we seen him just at convention or different places, but we had a kind of a special bond. And sometimes he'd call us over and just talk to us, because it was kind of special. Anyways, we got the building done, and I said to Gary, when do you think you want this building done? And he said, it'll be about a year. I said, what it'll take to build it? He said, no, we want this running in 3 months. I said, Gary, that's not really possible. I mean, this is a huge building, and all the mechanics in this thing, to do it in 3 months. He said, Ben, only if you think so. And, you know, in about less than 3.5 months, we started putting out oil, and it's been running ever since. And it's just done an amazing job. And so it is possible. And, you know, Gary lived not just that job, he lived his whole life like that. He built that place in Croatia like that. He worked in Oman like that, in all the different countries. And, you know, we have a special care and love for this company because Gary, everything he done. And, you know, yeah, just the little stories and the times that I remember one time, you know, he sometimes, you know, we're guys, sometimes we had differences, you know. And so I remember sitting down one, and Gary was upset about something, the way we done something. I said, Gary, this is the standard in Canada. This is how we have to do it. Workman's compensation is so and so on. We get shut down. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help me. Right. The next morning, come put his arm around me and said, Ben, I really appreciate what you're doing. Let's just keep doing it. You know, sometimes it was just like that. But Gary was always a guy that would reason out and think about it. And he wasn't just stubborn about that. He really knew what he wanted, but he was willing to bend if that's what the law was. And I never forget, one day there was a guy they were sitting at the road videoing us working on the roof, because, you know, you have to be tied off and you have to do all these different things. And there was a guy videoing on the highway, taking pictures of us working. And then he come and drove and parked at the end of the driveway. And Gary said to me, he said, who's that truck sitting down at the end of our driveway? I said, I don't know, but it looks like a government truck. He said, well, tell him to go home. Like, this is my project I'm working on. I said, well, Gary, I'll go down and see, right? So I drove down there, and the guy says, hey, I'm going to work with compensation. I've been bidding you guys, and we want to talk to you about some things. So I Corey was with me and I said, Corey, go get Gary and we'll talk, right? So he went down and told Gary, now Gary, this is a guy that you want to be nice to, just so you know. You make sure you're nice to him. And he come and Gary was just amazing. Oh, so glad you come. Thanks for coming by. You know, he was an amazing, Gary was, he was a chameleon. So he just talked nice to the guy and the guy walked around and said, you're doing an amazing job. Looks really good. There's some things I need you to change, but we're all good. You know, we'll just come back and check it in a couple, 3 months. So Gary was a master at knowing how to do things for the benefit. So yeah, we loved all the things that Gary did. Go ahead.
It was like Gary had a mission, and he only looked for people who would align with that mission. And he never, you know, one of the things that there's a story that I love that reminds me of Gary all the time. And part of the reason that it really reminds me of him is because when we were up there, we were working 17 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week. It was 17 hours a day, and that's full out. And I mean, it's not like it's hard work is what I'm saying. The conditions were really adverse. And he asked us if we'd go to Philippines because he knew the people over there needed help. They needed oils. They had a need. And so for one whole year, I went to Philippines for 1 month. I mean, I went to Philippines for 1 week every month for a year. And so the only time I got to sleep was on the long flight to Philippines and back. That was basically how I caught up on my sleep. And but the thing that reminded me, like Gary knew that there was a huge need for what was happening in Fort Nelson. And yet that didn't mean that he didn't see needs other places. And there's this story about a lady who was sitting on the beach scrubbing off starfish. And the beach is just covered with scum and starfish. And she'd scrub the scum off the starfish and toss it back in the ocean. And she did this every day for like an hour in the morning. And this guy who always ran there, he would go by and he's like, you know, what on earth are you doing? And so one day he asked her, he said, you know, I don't mean to be nosy, but what are you doing? And she said, I'm scrubbing the scum off the starfish and throwing it back in the ocean. And he said, you don't really think that's going to make a difference, do you? There's hundreds of them on the beach. And she was just kept on scrubbing, and she took it and tossed it in the ocean. She said it made a difference for that one. And that's how Gary looked at it. Every single person that he could help was worth helping.
You know, it was really interesting. He did some meetings in Fort Nelson, and you know, there's not many people there. There's 2,500 people there. So he'd have a meeting, and there'd be 15 people show up to come and see what this Gary Young was all about. And he'd get up and speak for an hour. And what a privilege it was for us. And I sat there thinking, you know, these people have no idea. Like if he flew to a big city, there'd be 1,000 people coming and listening to him. But it was okay. He sat and he spent the time and he thought about it and he spoke for like an hour. And he did that like 3 or 4 different times and just spoke with us. He was just amazing speaker. So anyways, one day the city wanted him to come in and they said, you know, we don't know what you're up to. We don't know what this essential oil company is all about. We want you to come and talk before we give you the final permits to finish the building. We need you to come and tell us all about it. So he was he got ready, and him and I went down there, and he sat in front of all the mayor and all the councilors and everybody. And I'm telling you, he wooed them like you never believe. Like he got up there and he showed a picture of the first farm, and a year later showed it growing crops, and then he went to his next farm and he talked about the different farms around the world. And then he said, and Fort Nelson, here it is this year. And he showed a picture of just the building just being started. And the mayor put his hands on his knees and said, what can we do to help you, Mr. Young? And, you know, like, it was just like when the heart is right, it just wins the heart of the people. Gary was just a master because he was focused, because he loved, because he was real. This wasn't made up. This wasn't a story. This was really who Gary was. So yeah, we love Gary and we love and appreciate all he did. And when we become Royal Crown Diamonds in 17, I think it was June of 17. Anyways, he was sick at that time. He was in the hospital, and So we were going down for the Royal Crown Diamond little, what do you call it, purple event or whatever. And we were kind of feeling a little disappointed because Gary wasn't going to have to be there, you know. So we got there and we walked into the building and there was Gary. So he got out of the hospital and he had somebody help him to hold him up because he was pretty weak, and he had a suit on and he looked really pale. And I said, Gary, you didn't need to be here for us here. He said, Ben, I wanted to be here. And, you know, that was the focus. That was Gary, you know, his heart was for everyone, and he cared about people, and he cared that we give our best there to help him, and he wanted to be there. And that was one of the last people he saw as members. And I just really, really appreciate it. And I think back and it was such an honor. And, you know, so we've dedicated our life to doing this because of what he's done for others. And we want to do the same for people. We want to give our life to help people and change lives. And what better thing can you do when you help others, right? Yeah.
Gary, I know we're at the half hour, Laura, but I just want to share this one thing that
You
Gary
have
told
all
us.
the time you want.
He took us into his private conference room and our team that was with us there. And he said,
well, that's on the Royal Crown Diamond. Yeah.
And he said, you know, this company, the foundation of this company was built on relationships. And he said, it'll continue on relationships. And he said, you might, you know, people might forget what you said, but they won't forget how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, like social media and all the other things, they have a place and they're useful. There's many, many tools, but you still have to build relationships because that's a foundation that will never crumble. And, you know, it was like,
now that was his last message to us.
And it was like, you know, doing what's easy isn't a prerequisite to achieve your goal, but doing what's necessary is. And the desire that you have to achieve it is what makes it easy. Because your heart is in it, and you just seeing the quality of life improved for other people is the most rewarding thing ever. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you know what, and because of the way we lived and how Carol did the oils, and the boys were growing up and they started using the oils, and now their kids use them. And you know, when Gary came up there and worked with Corey, our son, Corey is a bit rough on the edges, and so he had been used to mining and whatever, you know. And but Gary met the challenge right head on and worked with Corey, and you know, by the time they were done, they become best friends. And he was reaching out to Corey on the cell phone and talking to him about how the building was going and so on and so forth. So then they wanted to hire somebody to run the farm when we got it built up there. So they sent some guys up from Texas, and they were there, and they just didn't have the mentality because they weren't focused and they weren't dedicated, you know. And they sent somebody else up, and pretty soon Gary says, you know, Corey, you don't want all these guys running the farm. I send them people up and you don't like them and you don't want them there. If they're not going to do it, you're going to have to do it. And Corey said, well, listen, I'm not going to have them wreck this and have bad oils. He said, if that's what it takes, I'll run this farm. So they sent Brett up and taught him how to do the distilling and taught him all the things. And he's been running it now for 5 years. And so he's, done a great job.
He's not running it now.
But now he's not running it. Him and Brett Packer and Chris Packer have been, Mary asked the three of them to look after all the farms around the world. So basically they're managing all the sourcing for oils all over the world now. But, you know, you earn the trust. And, you know, Gary was always said that. He said, you know, he'd have somebody come up that was brand new and he'd say, they haven't earned their stripes yet. You know what I mean? Like they weren't part of Gary until they'd earned the stripes, until he was satisfied that they were sincere and they were ready. He wanted them, you know, to be focused. So yeah, we just feel honored that they've made a difference in our life. Gary's made a difference in our life. And now, you know, the family is good friends. Carol sometimes calls up Jacob and he comes and speaks to some of her platforms because it's they're part of the family, you know, they're part of who we are. So anyway, sorry for going too long.
No, I could sit and listen to your stories all evening. I think a lot of us could. We usually just keep it 30 minutes because of, you know, we don't want to take all your time, but it's powerful to hear these stories, and we have to keep these stories alive so people understand the foundation of the company, even though Gary's not around to listen or to speak to us anymore. I think about those moments, Carol, whenever I remember sitting and listening to him going, wow. at the farm, at harvest, or at those opportunities where had a long day of work, and we just sat down and would get to hear from him. In those moments, I recognize it for value. I knew it was special. And it makes me, we have to keep it alive and tell the stories, because there's people that are going to be joining tomorrow and 10 years from now that need to hear these stories and understand that Young Living is what the foundation that Young Living is built on. And that is a passion for seeing people's lives change. And Carol, for those of you who don't know Carol and you're hearing her speak, to think that she went through such depression and such, those types of thoughts. She's such a person with such a kind heart and so joyful every time I've ever been around her, that to hear that is just, that's a life change, not just change, but saved. That's a person that turned her, the oils, how they had an impact on her brain chemistry. And look at the thousands of lives that changed because of that. Look at what happened with Ben and him being able to walk again. He never could have helped build the farm if the oils hadn't been there for him. So I look at that and go, what about you? Where are you right now? And what is your story? What is going to be your transformation that these oils have made an impact on you? Are you just keeping them to yourself? Are you just holding them, because they smell good, or you might use them occasionally? Are you using them daily? Are there people in your path? There was a cashier today that I was at the store that had telling me about his kidney stones. So I believe those are divine appointments. I believe that those are opportunities that people are put across our path for us to make a difference. And so we had Carol and Ben on tonight because of that. We have Valor because of them.
Let me share with you about Valor. So when I first went, like I was like in that state of not wanting to be here from age 4 to 45. And so it was very ingrained. Like I wasn't in a good place in any part of my life. And but when I went, I was so enamored, so convinced that people needed to hear this. Like if this was an option. And so in the first week after I got better, first 2 weeks after I got better, I was very ashamed of the sickness. And so I wrote to all my adult children who were now out of our home. I wrote to them why I hadn't been a good mom and why that life had been difficult. And so I wrote them all a letter. And within an hour of them receiving their letters, 2 of them called me and said, "Mom, I'm struggling with the same thing." And so I thought, you know what? If I struggled with that all of my life and hid it, 2 of my sons are struggling with it and hiding it. We're probably not the only ones in the world. And if I can help even one more person not to have to suffer like I suffered, it'd be worth it. And so I wanted to share, but I was so like scared and so nervous. And so, I don't know, just not in a good place. But I'd want to share it. I would have to hold my chin to be able to tell somebody because I was so nervous. And so Gary said, use Valor. And 2 capsulefuls down the hatch. And with that, I could talk without my chin shaking and my words quivering. And so Valor is amazing to give you the confidence to share, to say what you need to share, to do the things that you need to do, to tell somebody, even if you're scared, tell them anyway, because how do you know? Like, what if I didn't know? What if I wanted to quit so many times? But what if I quit? Like, how do I know? Gary always said the only way you can fail is to quit. And there's no other way to fail. So you just keep on sharing, keep on sharing, keep on sharing, and hold that vision of improving life for one person. It made a difference for that one. And that's how it goes, one drop at a time, one person at a time. And I'm so grateful for Laura and Jonathan
Mhm.
for carrying the torch.
Yeah, if I may just add just quickly, Jonathan and his dad came up to Fort Nelson and they worked on the farm and worked hard shoveling and working hard in amongst all this stuff. And some of our men came over and said, why are these guys working so hard here and digging and sweating? And you don't need to do that. That's our job. And her father-in-law Max, he just looked at him and smiled and said, you know what, we love to do this because we love this company. This is what the heart of Gary does to all of us. This is what we become. We become like Gary because he's a good leader. So I'm grateful for Mary now that she's carrying the torch like Gary did. And this company is going to grow and continue to grow because of the love and commitment that they have, the same like Gary did. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, and just I implore people to use your oils to change the way you think. And use your oils to think the way that you want to think. So think about how you would like to think. And think about, is the way you're thinking right now, is that going to help you achieve your goal? Is that going to make things better for your family? Is that going to make things better for your community? Think about how you're thinking and then just notice it and then decide, well, if I thought this way, that would make it easier for me to share. Or if I thought this way, then that would make it better somehow. And then use your oils to bring in and to solidify that good feeling. That's what Gary did. That's how he kept his thoughts out. He chose his thoughts. We have the ability to choose what we think and how we think about it. And that's the most empowering way that you can use your oils. Yes, you can use them to fix this and fix that. And they do lots and lots and lots of things, but you have to think right. You have to think the way that you want to achieve, and just look at your thoughts and say, okay, if I think this way, is it going to help me to achieve whatever I need to in life? And then use your oils to bring in that good thought. And the oils, I challenge you to use Northern Lights Black Spruce and Rose Oil. They're the oils with the 2 highest frequencies that will lift you the highest and help you to think the highest thoughts. And then add highest potential and valor with it, because those were Gary's favorite oils. And just have fun, play with your oils and decide how you want to think, and then think that way and just keep focusing on what you want. Don't let anybody steal your dreams. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't have optimal health in every way. And whatever your goal is, don't let anybody take it from you. Just focus on what you want and keep on going in that direction.
Awesome. So powerful. You're getting a lot of love in the chat boxes. Everyone's saying thank you. What an amazing testimony. This is awesome. Love your stories. Thank you for sharing. Wonderful message. And then Ben and Carol, thank you so much for sharing your intimate stories that changed people's lives. I appreciate all of your efforts to keep the memories of Gary alive. And also just the way that you all teach anyone and everyone. Thank you for, coming and sharing with us tonight. And you couldn't be more correct, because all of this started, Carol, with you and your thoughts. We have valor because Carol chose to think differently. Until then, you got 3 months. That's why we have valor again, you guys, because of the black spruce. So you truly are. Lynn just said you are a gift to all of us. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to hug you in person. The next time. It can't come soon enough. We're ready to be back in together.
Yeah, you bet.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for initiating this. Love you, appreciate you, and big hugs to Jonathan as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we love you all.
Love you too. Good night.
Good night.